De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk were forces to be reckoned with in their freshman seasons with Kentucky. What do they have to do to replicate that here in Sacramento? And what made them so effective? We'll look at the numbers. I'll share with you takeaways from watching hours of highlights right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all offseason, presented for you today by Bet Online. They have you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer at ABC 10 News. We have a few things to catch you up on before we dive into the Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox conversation. The main thing is that the Sacramento Kings made another signing. Quinn Cook has been signed to a one-year deal by the Kings. Essentially, it's a training camp invite, for lack of a better term. He will be a part of the Sacramento Kings training camp, and he will essentially be competing with Matthew Dellavedova for that third and final point guard spot, or that third string point guard spot, assuming the Kings are going to give that spot to one of the two of them. Maybe someone else rises to the occasion and shows that they could be a capable break glass in case of emergency, primary ball handler if something, knock on wood, were to happen to Fox or Davion Mitchell at any point. But we'll have to wait and see. It just adds more excitement, more drama to training camp. The thing I'll say about Quinn Cook is when we found out both Cook and Dellavedova were working out for the Sacramento Kings at Las Vegas Summer League, I personally preferred Cook over Dellavedova. One, he's younger. Two, more recently spent time with Mike Brown in Golden State. Three, Quinn Cook does have more of a, in my opinion, defined and refined offensive game than Dellavedova has, that I think fits well with what the Sacramento Kings would try to do, assuming that Quinn Cook would come in and try to run the offense the same way De'Aaron Fox and Davion Mitchell are going to run the offense, which is a fast tempo up and down the floor. So I personally prefer Cook over Dellavedova, although I'm very interested to watch this battle. It's just one of many training camp battles that we're going to have, and I'm actually going to be doing a full series with Brendan Nunez in early September. We're going to be doing a full series on each of these training camp battles. So keep an eye out for that. I'm looking forward to putting that together. We'll do that again when we get closer to training camp, because the Kings might not be done. Maybe they sign more players. We'll have to wait and see. They're certainly going to have the tough job of cutting down this roster, but the amount of competition in training camp to earn these rotational spots, the one thing we will know is even if the Kings only have a 9 or 10 man rotation, ultimately they're going to have 14, maybe 15 guys who are capable of playing, so that when you need to go into that depth, when you need to reach to the end of your bench at times, which will happen throughout the course of the season, there's not a significant drop-off like there's been in years past where the Kings would have 2 or 3 or 4 spots taken up by second-round draft picks and players who are a long shot to have a pretty established NBA role. So I'm excited for training camp. Again, we'll do more of that training camp battles content in early September. Brendan Nunez from the Kings Pulse and Kings Beat and Kings Herald is going to join me for that. Also, I have a huge thank you to share. I will share that at the end of the podcast. And also on today's podcast, The Athletic put out an article with some hypothetical Donovan Mitchell trade packages, and they had a Kings all-in package that I'm going to talk about in the next segment. But that's all after we discuss De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, that exciting Kentucky backcourt that has now been reunited here in Sacramento. And essentially what I did is I went back and I looked at some of the numbers. I tried to put together a list of games where both of them played really, really well. One typically played better than the other. Like one would have a phenomenal performance and the other one would have a really good performance. And there were a lot of those. There weren't too many games where Malik Monk would have like 25 and Fox would have 10 or 11. Like typically when one was playing well, the other was playing really well. Now, Malik Monk did have a handful of games where he had to put up 30 plus points because De'Aaron Fox actually wasn't playing. Monk played more games than Fox did their rookie season at Kentucky. But overall, Malik Monk was the leading scorer for the Wildcats with 19.8 points per game, also averaged 2.5 rebounds. His shooting splits 45% from the field, 39% from three-point range, and 82% from the foul line. Overall, very solid for De'Aaron Fox. His averages weren't quite as high, but still really good, at least offensively. Averaged 16.7 points per game, did average 4.6 assists, also averaged over 4 rebounds, 47% shooting from the field, 24% we know from three-point range, and 73%, which is pretty much where he's been for his NBA career, 73% from the foul line. The offensive and defensive ratings for both these guys are pretty encouraging. Offensive rating for Malik Monk was 118, defensive rating 100, and he had a 27.2% usage percentage, meaning Kentucky leaned on him heavily. And then with De'Aaron Fox, 113 offensive rating, but a 96 defensive rating. That's really good to see. Again, reminding you that De'Aaron Fox is capable of being a solid defender. Now, again, that's at the college level, not the NBA level. There's obvious differences there, but further reminder that De'Aaron, I think, can be an effective defender and be part of an effective defense. And his usage percentage was actually slightly higher than Malik Monk's as the point guard. That's kind of to be expected, 27.5% usage percentage there. So let's start going through some games, right? I'm going to share with you some games and some of their stat lines. And then I watched like almost 2 hours of just Malik Monk and Fox highlights together. Fox highlights by himself at Kentucky. Monk highlights by himself at Kentucky. And I just started taking notes, especially when it came to Malik Monk, because a lot of what Monk did in college hasn't, not that it hasn't translated to the NBA, but he doesn't have the same kind of role, or hasn't had the same kind of role, at least from what I understand of Monk's game in the NBA to this point. And I think he can get back to that in an effective way here in Sacramento. And it goes beyond just shooting, right? So let's run through some games. Very early in the season, the 28th of November against Arizona State, Malik Monk scored 23 points. He shot 40% from the field, 30% from three-point range, 80% from the foul line. Also had 4 assists. De'Aaron Fox, the reason why I wrote down this game, had a triple-double that early in the season. 14 points on 66% shooting from the field. He was a perfect 1 of 1 from three-point range in this game. Also shot 50% from the foul line, 11 rebounds, and 10 assists. So not as big of a scoring night for De'Aaron, but he did everything else for the team, backing up Malik's 23 points. Against UCLA, this was not in the Sweet 16 in the national tournament. This was early on in the season again in November, or rather December. This was early December. I think this was the very next game that Kentucky played. Malik Monk had 24 points, 52% shooting from the field, 50% from three-point range, didn't go to the foul line in this game. Also had 5 steals, and that's something that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And De'Aaron Fox, 20 points on 40, 25, 60 shooting with 9 assists. Then you look at against North Carolina on December 17th, Malik Monk, 47 points, 64% shooting from the field. He was just red hot in this game. And I watched highlights from this game. Dude could not miss. Also shot 66% from three-point range. He went 18 of 28 from the field for the game, 8 of 12 from three-point range. Just goes to show the microwave that he is, how streaky he is. He can explode like this for the Sacramento Kings in the NBA. Off of the bench or as a starter. We'll have to wait and see what that is. And De'Aaron Fox in this game, you would think, okay, Malik Monk scores nearly 50 points. It's his show, right? And anybody else is probably in the teens and just kind of coasting and letting him have the hot hand. No, De'Aaron Fox finished with 24 points of his own, shot 42% from the field, 85% from the foul line, and also had 10 assists in this game. And a lot of those assists were to the red-hot Malik Monk. Then against Alabama, this was in the conference tournament on the 11th of March. Malik Monk had 20 points, 42% shooting from the field, 40% from three-point range. Also had 4 rebounds. De'Aaron Fox had 28 points, 66% shooting from the field, 50% from three-point range, 73% from the foul line. Also got to the line 15 times in this game, which we know is a very big positive for De'Aaron's game. That was the conference tournament. Now we go to the actual NCAA tournament. And really, Malik Monk was the leading scorer for Kentucky for the majority of this season. But De'Aaron Fox became the go-to scorer and kind of the leader offensively for Kentucky during the national tournament itself. He stepped up a little bit. And I'm not saying Malik faded, but there's a reason why Fox ended up going 5 and Malik ended up going, did he go 10, if I'm not mistaken, to Charlotte? I can't, no, he didn't go 10. He went 9. I don't remember where he went. 11. Who knows? Actually, yeah, he must have gone after 10 because the Kings could have taken him 10 and instead they traded the pick away. So there's a reason why Fox went higher. A lot of it had to do with how he stepped up in the NCAA tournament. Malik Monk so they played 4 tournament games. Monk had 12 points, 14 points, 21 points, and then 12 points. De'Aaron Fox in the 4 games had 19 points, 14 points, 39 points, and 13 points. Let's talk about that 39-point performance against UCLA. That was the best offensive game for both guys. Also happened to be the game where De'Aaron put on a show and really completely outplayed Lonzo Ball. If you remember correctly, this was a massive game on the 24th of March. Monk, his 21 points came on 47% shooting from the field, 44% from three-point range, 50% from the foul line, and he did it in 32 minutes. Again, showing that while one guy's having a massive supersonic night, the other is still capable of putting up solid numbers, or at least did on that team. Fox's 39 points. He had 65% shooting from the field. Didn't hit a three-pointer. 86% shooting from the foul line. Got to the line 15 times, made 13 of them. You love to see that based off of his struggles there through his NBA career. Had 4 assists and played 36 minutes. Also went 13 of 20 from the field. So it was a super efficient scoring game for De'Aaron there. So those are just an example of 5 games where Fox and Monk put up good numbers together, right? And you can imagine that some of that, not all of that, but some of that can hopefully translate to the Sacramento Kings. Again, their usage rate was extremely high. Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron still leaned on heavily here in Sacramento, right, as the go-to scorer and the guy here. Malik Monk is not going to have that kind of role, but is capable of having those big offensive performances next to De'Aaron Fox. We've seen it before. But I started watching highlights of both these guys together, them individually in their times at Kentucky, and a lot of things jumped off the page to me, particularly when it comes to Malik Monk. Monk was really, really good in the fast break for that team. Like, we think Malik Monk, we think his NBA career, we think shooter, right? And he's a great shooter, was a good shooter in college as well. But Malik relentlessly attacked the basket with De'Aaron Fox in college. They both got out and ran in transition effectively. Like, it wasn't just, okay, De'Aaron had the wheels and everybody else just kind of brought up the rear and Malik was maybe there on the perimeter to bail Fox out if he was met at the rim. No, Malik was running just as hard as De'Aaron was. Malik half the time was throwing lobs or outlet passes to De'Aaron so he could finish in the fast break. Like, both of them were almost tick for tack, head and head, or head for head rather, going up the floor. Like, that's how they ran together. Malik was way more effective in the fast break than I realized watching some of these games and watching some of these highlights. And also, Malik, we know he's a average at best to below average defender. If you look at his time at Kentucky, he was never known for locking anybody down. But Malik Monk played the college passing lanes pretty good. Like, there were a number of times, and again, these are highlights and these are highlight reels, so it's only really going to show the best of what a player does. It's not going to show the worst, even though I did see some highlights of Malik Monk not playing the best defense, just like I see highlights of De'Aaron Fox not playing the best defense. But Monk, I thought, had a pretty good knack for recognizing passing lanes, playing them, and getting a handful of steals. One of the games that I mentioned there when we were going through the stats is he had a 5-steal game. He's good at sometimes jumping those passing lanes, creating deflections, which lead to steals either for himself or for his teammates. If he can incorporate that in his game here in Sacramento, that's very exciting. So those are some of the major takeaways that I had in some of the biggest games that I wanted to talk about. Ultimately, what do those numbers tell us? What do those notes tell us? What they tell us is that we've seen the two of them be effective before, but on a smaller stage. I'm not going to say significantly smaller stage because Kentucky is a massive NCAA program, but obviously the NBA game is completely different. And while De'Aaron Fox has elevated his game since coming to the NBA, I'm not going to say Malik hasn't, but Malik went from being the guy in Kentucky to he's been a role player to at best second, third option offensively in the NBA. And when he was the second option, to be honest with you, like his time in Charlotte, he didn't really live up to that. He has translated his game for the most part in the NBA to being a spot up and catch and shoot 3-point shooter, which is not a bad thing. That's why the Sacramento Kings signed him. The Sacramento Kings desperately need that from him. And I'm not saying I don't want him to focus on that, because the Kings need him to focus on that, whether he's starting or coming off the bench. But what this shows me is that Malik's game is bigger than that. He's capable of putting the ball on the floor. I'm really excited to see how good he is running in transition. Because if he starts next to De'Aaron Fox, that might be a clear reason why. He clearly can run with Fox, just like I'm confident Kevin Huerter and most on this roster are going to be able to run with Fox. But even if Fox is out of the game, let's say Malik is playing in a bench role, Fox is out of the game and he's playing with Davion Mitchell. Malik showed the capability of being a facilitator offensively in transition, or at least he's done it before. I've seen that he is capable of doing it. Plus, the two of them had just so many highlights together and so many fun moments together. I'm hoping that they'll be able to replicate that here in Sacramento. But I encourage you, go and look at some of the numbers. Go and watch highlight reels of these guys. If you want to be fired up, go and watch Kentucky's 2016-2017 highlight reel and watch the two of them put on an absolute show time after time after time after time. I don't expect Kentucky level usage rate, Kentucky level numbers from both of them here in Sacramento in the NBA. But it's fun that they're reunited. I know that they can be effective together. And I think Malik Monk can surprise a lot of people with how significant of a role he might actually have here in Sacramento beyond just the perimeter shooter and essentially perimeter poacher that maybe we thought he was or is at this point in his NBA career, and why the Sacramento Kings just brought him in the first place. So, and if anything jumps off the page to you, let me know. If you're excited about Fox and Monk, if you want to talk a little bit deeper about specific parts of Fox and Monk, have any questions about it or any concerns, to be honest, about it, let me know. I'm at George Sack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Coming up next, The Athletic put out a all-in trade package that the Sacramento Kings could send to the Utah Jazz that I actually think the Jazz would listen to, but I'm not a fan of it. I'll share with you why I'm not a fan of it and what that package is after I tell you more about our title sponsor here of the Locked On Kings podcast. That is Bet Online. They are the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. You can find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league. That includes Major League Baseball going on right now, NFL. You can bet on preseason games if you want to, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, even golf. It's all there for you. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today, and check out their fun future bets in regards to the Sacramento Kings, their win total over-unders, the NBA championship odds. If you're really feeling crazy and want to try and cash in on a massive, massive payday, good luck to you if you're betting that. I'm certainly rooting for you. But whatever you're betting, make sure you're doing it on BetOnline, where the game starts. We've talked before here on Locked On Kings about the possibility of acquiring Donovan Mitchell, who I admit is one of my favorite players in the league to watch. I'm not saying that I don't think Donovan Mitchell would be great here in Sacramento, but I am concerned about how he would fit. And I also don't think that at this point in time, based off of the moves that Monte McNair has made, the general path that the Sacramento Kings are on, even if Donovan Mitchell would absolutely be an upgrade on this roster to a significant degree, it doesn't necessarily make sense with what the Kings are doing. In fact, it might put a halt in a negative way to what the Sacramento Kings are trying to do. So I looked at this article. I actually first heard about it on D'Lo and KC on ESPN 1320 here in Sacramento. And it has 6 basically all-in trade packages from 6 different teams to acquire Donovan Mitchell. And I looked at the Kings package, and I'll let you decide. Here's the Kings all-in package to acquire Donovan Mitchell from The Athletic. Harrison Barnes, no surprise there. Keegan Murray, Davion Mitchell, a 2027 first-round swap, unprotected pick swap, a 2028 first-round pick, unprotected, and a 2029 first-round pick swap, unprotected. That is a massive haul. And I know a lot of people are going to be turned off by the amount of pick swaps and unprotected picks that are a part of this deal. It's not even that for me. For me, it's honestly the amount of young talent the Sacramento Kings are giving up in return. Harrison Barnes being a part of this deal, no surprise at all. One of Keegan Murray and Davion Mitchell being a part of this deal, no surprise at all. I understand the Utah Jazz are going to ask for 2 plus, or both of them plus multiple first-round picks. And honestly, if the Kings were in a situation where this made sense, I would have no problem incorporating the first round picks necessary to make this move happen. It is definitely an all-in move. Absolutely. But I also think there's a chance that the Kings could maybe convince Donovan Mitchell to stick around here, because what would really suck is if you basically do it for a couple year rental of Donovan Mitchell. I'm not sure about his contract. I think he's got like 3 years left. I have no idea. And then Donovan Mitchell walks and your draft future is completely stripped for a 2, 3, 4 season rental. Maybe those 2, 3, 4 seasons are worth it. I have no idea. But again, I don't think this makes sense. And as much of a Keegan Murray homer as you know I am, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, and I'm looking at one thing in particular. Donovan Mitchell is absolutely a better player than Keegan Murray is, right? Way better than Harrison Barnes. Way better than Davion Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell would be, and maybe you disagree with this. I know some people would disagree with this. I personally feel like Donovan Mitchell would be the best player on this Kings roster right now. If you were to take Donovan and put him on this Kings roster without taking anybody else away. So Fox is still here. Sabonis is still here. He's the best player on this roster, in my opinion. Now, a lot of people think the reason why Donovan is as good as he is and has had the success that he had is kind of a product of his environment, right? The Utah Jazz put a pretty solid squad around him, and he was able to be successful in that squad. A lot of people don't think that Donovan Mitchell is better than De'Aaron Fox. I guess I'm willing to listen to an argument about that. I've seen Donovan have the success that Fox hasn't really had the opportunity to have, right, on the playoff stage. I think Donovan Mitchell would be the best player on this roster right now. Maybe it's not a massive margin, but that's how I feel about the situation. Even so, Keegan Murray is younger. Keegan Murray is completely under team control, right? You just traded away team control of Tyrese Halliburton for Domantas Sabonis to pair him with De'Aaron Fox. And I do think the Domantas Sabonis-Donovan Mitchell pairing could be interesting, but I honestly think that that Fox and Sabonis would be a better pairing and will be a better pairing than Donovan Mitchell and Sabonis would be. So essentially, you're erasing the primary reason you traded for Sabonis. Well, actually, that's not true, because in this package, De'Aaron Fox is still here. But at the same time, I do have questions about how De'Aaron Fox and Donovan Mitchell work together. I think it would be incredibly exciting backcourt to watch, but you might run into the somewhat same issues that you had with Fox and Halliburton in sharing the basketball to be effective. Donovan Mitchell comes in and basically takes the keys, or tries to take the keys, and I wouldn't necessarily blame him for that. I'm not for this trade. I don't like it. I think it's too much to give up at this point in time. I don't think it makes sense for the Sacramento Kings. I don't think Monte McNair honestly would consider it at this point, and I think that's a good thing. But maybe I'm crazy, because that is definitely a clear way for the Kings to improve the roster. They trade away a lot of future assets and their really, really talented young talent to build a significant big three of Fox, Mitchell, and Sabonis, who I do believe would put this Kings team immediately into the playoff conversation. Like, we're talking a 6 seed expectation for me. Like, not just playing, but actual playoff expectation. Some people want that. But will they build upon that in the limited years that they have together, while also sacrificing all of that, that draft capital and all that young talent in order to do it? I'm not a big fan of this trade. But if you are, let me know. I'm at George Sack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. I have a huge thank you to give out. Plus, the Sacramento Kings released their preseason schedule. We'll talk about that in just a second. The good news is the Kings preseason schedule is out. Yay. The bad news is you see the dates of the preseason schedule and you go, oh my God, we're still so far away. October 3rd, October 9th, October 12th, October 14th. That's the preseason for your Sacramento Kings. Yeah, it's less than 2 months away now. So it's closer, but we still got a long way to go before legitimate Kings basketball. But we know that training camp is going to be a lot of fun. Training camp begins in September, so that's going to hopefully hold us over. And pretty soon, we're going to have the actual NBA regular season schedule dropping. And when that drops, I'm going to have a guest on with me. We're going to do a deep dive into that schedule and have some fun with that. But here's the Kings preseason schedule. They open up preseason against the Lakers in LA, I believe, at 7:30 on October 3rd. Then they play in Portland on October 9th. They will host the Phoenix Suns on the 12th, and then they will host the Los Angeles. Oh, I'm sorry. They're on the road in Phoenix on the 12th. The Kings only have, I said this all completely wrong. Let's restart. And I'm not going to edit this out. Lakers host the Kings on October 3rd to open preseason. Then the Kings host the Trailblazers on October 9th. Then the Kings play the Suns in Phoenix on the 12th. And then the Kings wrap up preseason hosting the Lakers on the 14th. Boy, I couldn't have botched that more. That is the Kings preseason schedule. Clearly, I'm out of practice on what reading an NBA schedule even looks like. So that is the Kings preseason schedule. And before we wrap up, I have a massive thank you to throw out to you Locked On Kings listeners. A little over 5 years ago, around 5.5 years ago, I started hosting Locked On Kings. I took over Locked On Kings from Jason Ross. So this number that I'm about to share with you includes the first about half a year that Jason hosted the Locked On Kings podcast. So I don't claim full credit for this at all. But as of yesterday, and this number is already old, we have had 2,254,539 downloads, listens, views of the Locked On Kings podcast. And what's incredible is with the incorporation of YouTube over the last year and some change, we've only been doing YouTube for just barely over a year. This year, we are already approaching, it's August, and we are just shy of 1 million. So over half of the all-time downloads of the Locked On Kings podcast are going to be from this year alone. That's incredible. The support of Locked On Kings over the course of this year on YouTube, and of course for you OG audio listeners, it's been phenomenal. I'm so thankful for that. That number is astronomical and mind-blowing, and I can't wait to get that number even higher than that. So thank you so much for your support. I was blown away when I saw that number. I had to share it, and I had to make sure I said thank you so much here on Locked On Kings. It's incredible. Like, the reality is, I talk about and you support the arguably worst franchise in professional sports. And I'm not saying that to fire shots at anybody. The Sacramento Kings have not been to the playoffs in 16 years. And yet, I have numbers like that and the support that I do from a fan base who is starved for winning. And a lot of those numbers come during a global pandemic when the arenas were half empty, a team that was putting out a season like last season where we all wanted to basically stop watching and forget our fandom for a year. And yet you continue to support. That means so much to me. I have the privilege of being recognized by some of you out in public. I was actually at a sandwich shop near my wife's work in Elk Grove recently and had I think it was Paul. Hopefully I didn't say your name wrong, Paul, or that is your actual name if you're listening. But and he said hi to me, and like that means the world to me. It truly means the world to me that there are those of you out there that continue to support this franchise. And therefore, by supporting this franchise, you support me and the Locked On Kings podcast, and you support the Locked On Podcast Network in general. Trust me, the support of Sacramento Kings fans for this podcast does not go unrecognized by the higher-ups in the Locked On Podcast Network and in Tegna. Like, you don't understand how good Locked On Kings does in the rankings of all of our NBA podcasts. And again, that is for the worst franchise in the NBA. The franchise that holds the record for longest playoff drought in the NBA is top 10 in numbers in our Locked On NBA circuit. Like, that's incredible. And I'm so thankful for that. Thank you so much. People say I deserve it. Absolutely not. Well, I've worked hard, but I don't get there or get anywhere remotely close without this franchise. Without this fan base who supports this franchise. And I'm just blown away by those numbers, blown away by the support, and fires me up to continue to put as much effort as I can into continuing great content for you in the days, months, and years to come. So thank you so much for that. Appreciate your support. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.